Um, as much as people praise democracy, it's stupid and evil. And I've mentioned that a million times before, and I've pointed out what happens in the real world. And I pointed out that most of the most vicious tyrannies in history were democratically elected constitutional republics, just like the US. Red China was, Soviet Union was, North Korea was, the Weimar Republic was, that turned into Nazi Germany, and on and on. Um, but a but while I usually talk about the more complicated tricks that tyrants do and deceptions and manipulations and Ponzi schemes and messing with the currency and monetary policy and all these fairly involved, intricate scams, it's really easy to demonstrate that democracy, not only is it immoral and bogus, but of course it's always going to lead to oppression and injustice. And very simple, obvious scenarios demonstrate this. Let's say there's a little country, people minding their own business and trading voluntarily, but somebody comes along and convinces them to believe in, first of all, authority, and second of all, democracy. Because if you don't believe in authority, you can't believe in a democratic government. And the notion of democracy is that, well, we all get together and vote, and whatever the majority decides is what happens. And often people confuse that with consensus, even though they're almost exact opposites. Consensus, as an example, if there's 5 people, it's like, oh, it's time to eat, what should we get? And they say, well, we could order Chinese food, we could order pizza, we could go out to a restaurant, and one guy says, oh, I could go for Chinese, and 4 say, we want to order pizza, and the 5th guy goes, okay, yeah, I'll do pizza. Like, wouldn't have been my first choice, Chinese would have been my first, but yeah, pizza works. That's consensus. Democracy is the one guy says, I want Chinese food, and the other 4 say, you have to pay for pizza because there's 4 of us and there's 1 of you and we voted, and we are going to violently impose our decision on you. That is democracy. Consensus is for everybody to do something, everybody has to agree. And another way to do consensus is those 4 people will order pizza and the 1 guy will order Chinese. Like that. And consensus is anarchy. Because consensus is the individual doesn't have to do anything that he doesn't voluntarily choose to do, whether it's on his own or in cooperation with others or organizing or whatever. But often people confuse consensus with democracy, which is weird because they're opposites. Because majority forcing their opinion on a minority is what democracy actually is. So imagine you have this nice little country where people are productive and they mind their own business and stuff, and they get along and they cooperate and all that. But they believe in authority and they believe in democracy. Like, they haven't tried it yet, but it sounds so good. Oh, it's the people's voice, and we get together and we decide as a whole how we think something should be done. Well, what's going to happen in that scenario? Let's say they've never tried it before, but the idea sounds good. So somebody gets into power, and no, not even into power. First, there's an election. They say, well, let's vote for who's going to be in charge. And we'll keep it really simple. And there are 2 candidates. And one says, well, if you elect me, I don't really know what I would do. I don't particularly see a problem that we need to vote on. Like, we seem to be getting along. We seem to be fairly productive and stuff. So, I don't know. Like, I could maybe manage things or something. That's his campaign platform. I could maybe manage things or something. Question mark. That's the slogan for his campaign. Who would vote for that? Nobody. Because if you're going to vote, you're voting for something to be done. You're not voting for, I'm all enthusiastic about electing a candidate who's not going to do anything. So that candidate, even though he's closest to having the right idea, gets no votes. Somebody else comes along and says, well, I want to get elected, and so I'm going to run on this platform. I think that there are some people in our little country that have more than they need. And I think if I tax them, and it doesn't have to be too harsh, I'll do a 5% tax on the richest 5%. of the population. So I'll just take a 20th of the wealth from the richest 20th of the population. And with that money, because the rich have more than the poor, that's why they're called the rich, I'll have enough money to build parks and a library and give some money to the poor and do all that. Who's going to vote for me to do that? And the vast majority of people, if they believe in authority and democracy, are going to vote for that. Which means the choice between leaving your neighbors in freedom and forcibly robbing your neighbors, democracy is always going to favor forcibly robbing your neighbors. Because nobody's going to be gung-ho about voting for somebody to go do nothing. And if they believe in democracy and they believe in majority rule, all you have to do is promise the majority that you're going to tax the minority, the evil rich. And if they think it's legitimate to do that by way of government and voting, why the hell wouldn't they do that? Okay, well, there's these rich people, and it's not like they're going to be killed and robbed of everything. They're only being taxed 5%. They're still going to be a lot richer than me. And it's being done by way of law, and the people want it. You know, it's not me going and robbing them personally, because I might feel bad about that, or at least feel scared because I would be incurring the risk myself. But if you let me vote for somebody else, and we're all taught that whoever gets the majority vote is allowed to implement the quote-unquote will of the people, of course most people are going to vote for free goodies from themselves, paid for by somebody else. And so the only way a candidate could be dumb enough to lose is if he says, if elected, I'm going to tax the 90% and give it to the 10%. Well, the 90% is going to say, well, we're going to vote against you. Whereas if you promise to tax a minority of the people, the majority are going to go, okay, we believe in democracy. And we're going to democratically rob the richest ones. And then we get free stuff. Yeah, it might be $1,000, it might be $10,000, whatever. We get a bunch of free stuff if we vote you into office, because you, as democratically elected leader, on behalf of the people, will steal other people's stuff and give it to us. And that doesn't require the voters to be malicious. They can think they're being perfectly good because they're taught that democracy is good. Democracy is how we run things and how we get along. They don't view it as violence because they're trained to not view it as violence. And the 5% who are getting robbed, it doesn't matter what they think. Like, okay, you vote for the other guy. See how well that works. There's 5% of you, which means your vote doesn't matter at all because you're in the minority. And democracy is all about the majority getting its way. And so that's, the first obvious example is redistribution of wealth. And then guess what? They do it again 5 years later, or 1 year later, or 10, or whatever. All right, who's still rich? And all you have to do in any given situation is rob the richest minority and give to the poorest majority. And it doesn't matter what the overall wealth is, and it doesn't matter the effects on the overall wealth from your collectivist stupidity, as demonstrated by history. If you crash the economy and make nobody productive because everybody productive gets robbed, like Soviet Union and Red China, they're still going to keep voting for free crap for themselves because they're still not smart enough to realize that they're going to impoverish the whole world by way of authoritarian democracy. All they see is, well, I get some more free stuff if I vote for you. And yeah, it's not as much free stuff as last year because the economy and all. And they're too dumb to know that the economy is going down because of what they're doing. Because you're robbing people for being productive. So people stop being productive. And the funny thing is, Karl Marx knew this and he explained it. In the Communist Manifesto, he admitted, well, under communism, people don't produce a goddamn thing. So we need capitalism to make the wealth, and then we come in and steal it and redistribute it. Now, how he thought that was going to keep going, I'm not really sure. Because eventually you run out of stuff. You can't just hand money around in a circle indefinitely because it doesn't do anything. Wealth is what people produce, and if people don't produce wealth, we all starve to death. as demonstrated by 42 million dead people in China who starved to death under Mao's redistribution plans and central planning. And that brings up the second part, the second way that democracy is inherently evil and destructive and stupid, even among well-intentioned people. They don't have to be evil people. They can be good people voting for, well, yeah, help the poor. The belief in democracy plus good people equals mass evil. People of China aren't just inherently evil. People of Russia aren't inherently evil. This is just what happens when you accept that premise of government and democracy. Of course it goes this way. Why wouldn't it go this way? And that's why I'm using this simple scenario. So wealth redistribution is an obvious first thing, but there are a zillion other ways that it does the same thing. Like, religion. They decide, well, there's this religion over there. Most of us believe in religion A. There's a few people who believe in religion B, but really we don't really like them as much. And the majority says, well, we want religion A to be taught and not religion B because most of us believe in this. And so if you have two candidates and one says, well, I'm going to promote religion A, and one says, I'm going to promote religion B, in a democratic society, what's going to happen? Of course, the majority is going to have its way forcibly imposed by government. In a free society that doesn't have a ruling class, the people in religion A just go, well, we do our thing, you do yours. We don't feel the need to forcibly impose it on you, and you don't have to forcibly impose it on us, in which case it doesn't matter who's the majority and who's the minority, because we're not like trying to have one thing that everybody has to choose. It's not, okay, everybody get together and pick what we're all going to do about this. And that is the ultimate stupidity of democracy. To make a completely ridiculous example, so you go to your whole town and say, who here likes democracy? Yay, we all do. All right, what are we going to do this weekend? Well, they're going fishing here and they're going up skiing and these guys are just going to hang around, watch TV. No, that's anarchy. We can't have that. The town has to vote for what we are all going to do this weekend, and then we're all going to do it. And any who resist will be caged. That is democracy. And in that setting, nobody would go for it. They'd all recognize it as inherently stupid and evil. Like, why on earth would there be this assumption that we all have to do the same thing? Well, gee, that is the basis of democracy. That, well, majority of us want X, so everybody has to pay for it, including the people who don't support X, who either don't like it, they don't want it to exist, or they want to do it a different way, or they have a different idea of how to approach it. Democracy is basic. It's the majority forcing its will on the minority, obviously. That's just inherently what it is. But that presumes that there has to be a centralized solution. And in something like, hey, what should we do this weekend? Nobody's dumb enough to think that would be a good idea. All right, we're all going to go see this movie. Everyone in this town is going to go see this movie because we had a vote and 53% of the people wanted to see this movie. And it's not okay to just have 53% go see the movie and the other people do whatever the hell they want, because that is literally anarchy. Nobody is ruling anybody. Each person is running his own life. That's anarchy. That's chaos. People might do different things. Oh my God, how are we ever going to survive? Whereas democracy is, we as a people decided we're going to go see this movie. When what it really means is we as a majority decided we're going to force the minority to do something they don't want to. And that's the only thing government democracy ever is. Because when you vote on a law, because every law is a threat of violence, you're getting together and say, whose agenda should be forced on everybody else? Government is never about consensus. It really is. Government and consensus are mutually exclusive. There's no such thing as a government that believes in consensus because it wouldn't ever do anything. Like, consensus is, hey, everybody who wants to chip into this program to help out this poor family, you're allowed to. And people who don't want to, you don't have to. Good. That's not government. That's anarchy. So you cannot have a government based on consensus. And the funny thing is, one of the ridiculous things we're taught in political mythology is consent of the governed, which is just an inherently bogus idea. It's inherently contradictory. It's just stupid. But it's repeated everywhere as if it actually makes sense. Oh, well, we're governed by people, but we consent to it. So you're violently dominated of your own free will. That doesn't make any freaking sense. It can't be both. It's one or the other. If it's consent, that is voluntary interaction, that is anarchism. If it is government, that is by definition authoritarian control, which is not consent. And the thing is, the control freaks know this, but they have to put it in these terms. It's like, they love democracy because, there's this saying, I forget which president said it, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others, which is a clever little witticism, and it's utterly false. Democracy is the worst form of government that has ever plagued the frickin' planet. Democratic constitutional republics have been at least the top 5 mass murdering regimes in the history of the world. Red China being number 1, Soviet Union being number 2, Nazi Germany being number 3, and so on. The reason democracy is so freaking evil and destructive is because the tyrants are pretending to act on behalf of the people. Like, you got the people to cheer for and vote for the violent domination of the minority, which means you're going to be able to get away with a lot more than if you're just doing it saying, I'm doing it because I feel like it. Hand over your money. Instead, they can pretend to be acting on behalf of the people. This is why the U.S. Constitution created a regime that was infinitely more tyrannical than the king that was overthrown by the American Revolution. Well, overthrown in the colonies, it wasn't overthrown in England. But that's why the Constitution is a far better tool for tyrants than a monarchy was. Because it gives the illusion that the people have some say in the matter. The illusion that it's the will of the people being done when a ruling class violently dominates a minority. And as long as people can be duped into thinking that it's being done on their behalf and that they have some say in the matter, and that really they're in charge, the whole we are the government BS, then the tyrant can get away with way more than if he just admits, hey, I'm just doing whatever the hell I want and I have a bunch of guys with guns, so you have to obey me. And that's especially true in a country where 100 million normal people have guns. You can't rule by brute force. You can't just say, we're doing this because we feel like it and we have lots of guns. It's like, yeah, but you don't have 100 million, and we do. But of those 100 million gun owners, the vast majority believe in democracy. They've been duped into believing that when you do certain rituals and have certain documents and do this pseudo-religious lunacy, then it becomes moral and just and necessary and good to violently impose the will of the majority on the minority. Whether the minority is a religious minority or the evil rich or the people who want to do this or the people who believe in that or the people who have a different view of this and talk about that and whatever it is. And I've pointed out before that everybody is in the minority. Every single person is in the minority. And that sounds really stupid until I elaborate on what I mean. You can divide up humanity a zillion different ways. And at least in one of those ways, you are going to be in the minority. As far as wealth, you might not be in the top 5% richest people. You probably aren't. Most people aren't. So in that case, you'll be in the majority cheering for, if you believe in democracy, you'll be in the majority cheering for the 5% minority to be robbed to give you free stuff. However, if you belong to a certain religion, that puts you in the minority. But maybe you're in the majority religion too. How about race? All right, well, if you're in the majority race, that's one thing. If you're in the minority race, we get to oppress you because, hey, democracy. We voted, and the people who there are more of voted for something you don't want, and you lose because you're in the minority. atheists versus Christians versus this versus that. There's 8 million ways you can carve up society. And if you do them all at once, everybody is in the minority in at least one of the ways you carved it up, which means you as the tyrant, in the name of the people and in the name of democracy, can violently dominate and rob absolutely everybody. Because you just slice it up different ways, and in different situations, you point to different minorities as people who need to be forcibly controlled. And so the inevitable end, and again, this is even assuming a generous, well-intentioned, mostly moral population that's been duped into believing democracy. It's going to be a giant frickin' disaster. Because if they believe that democratic force is justified, if you do it through the political process, then there's literally no reason for them to not advocate the violent domination of their neighbors in dozens of different ways, on dozens of different issues. Well, most of the country thinks alcohol is great, but we kind of frown on cocaine. All right, let's have a law. Let's vote on it and have a law that says if you use cocaine, we're going to cage you. Well, it's democratic and it's the law, and hooray, hooray. Let's see, alcohol versus marijuana. Pick sides. Well, we voted that alcohol is good and marijuana is bad. So let's have our majority opinion violently enforced on the people who prefer pot to alcohol. I mean, something that's stupid. Something that's just, which mind-altering substance do you prefer? In fact, that one's completely stupid because alcohol is worse in every freaking way that I can think of than marijuana. As far as what it does to people's temperament, what it does to their health, everything about it is worse, but the majority got used to alcohol and thought it was okay, but a smaller percentage of people, at least until recently, thought marijuana was okay. So the politicians came along and said, well, this is the new way to get power. We divide them up by which is their favorite drug of choice. More people like alcohol, all right, that's going to be legal. Fewer people like marijuana, cool. That gives us a root of power that the stupid majority, while boozing it up, is going to cheer for because it's not the drug they choose. And they'll be perfectly happy by way of the democratic process to violently impose their completely arbitrary whims on the minority. And they'll do it in a million different ways. And all you have to do, if you're the tyrant, is figure out a way to carve up the population so 51% or more cheer for you to violently dominate the 49% or less. Don't you just hate the people that fill in the blank? Wouldn't you like it if we taxed them or regulated them or controlled them or bossed them around? Yeah, says the 51%. And it's democratic. It's the will of the people. It's legal. It makes the game so easy for tyrants, which is why, democracy isn't just, well, even that's not okay. No, that is the worst of all. Because it is violent domination that gets the approval of most of the people. And they don't see a problem with it as long as they're in the majority. And it's a minority being stepped on, which is forever. And, and there's so many real world examples that can be used to make advocates of democracy squirm, slavery being an obvious one. Well, hey, there's a whole lot of white people. There aren't that many black people here. And the law says white people get to own black people. Now, that's a little oversimplified because there actually were white slaves and there were free blacks and there were even free blacks who owned black slaves. And but statistically speaking, mostly it was white slave owners owning black people or claiming they owned black people. And the government said, yep, you own them. What good does democracy do in that situation? None. It does less than no good because it legitimizes that evil. Well, hey, the majority wants it, so it must be okay. And it's legal because the majority voted for it. And this is our great democratic constitutional republic. And so if you resist that, if you try to help a slave escape or teach a slave to read, then you're the evil, nasty, law-breaking criminal terrorist who's an enemy of democracy. And that's all it takes. If normal people believe in democracy and government, that's all it takes for a tyrant to gain power and to have the masses of asses cheering for it. And it's only happened about a bazillion different ways in history, based on race, based on religion, based on income, based on education. The crap in Cambodia where it was mass murder of educated people. Oh, you're too smart. You better be killed because you're an enemy of the people because you're not an idiot. I mean, that's one of the more just outlandish real world examples of the will of the people in action by way of authoritarianism. Don't you hate those people who are smart? Yes, as the throngs of idiots. And then the throng of idiots gets their way by way of government. And there's literally mass murder of smart people in Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge, under Pol Pot. And that's democracy. That's what it is. And it's not just, it can lead to that. It's, not every example is that openly vicious and violent, but that's all it ever is. Democracy is absolutely incompatible with peaceful coexistence because by definition, in politics, democracy is the majority's idea being legislated, which means being forced on other people. Democracy is incompatible with peace. It's incompatible with freedom. It's incompatible with morality because it necessarily involves the violent subjugation of the minority. Always. If you're not violently subjugating a minority, you're not doing democracy. And the fact that it takes, in that simple an example, you can demonstrate why it's so bogus, and yet still a lot of the world, including the people who have lived under these violent, democratically elected regimes, they still talk as if democracy is the salvation of mankind. Democracy is the tyrant's best friend. It is the best trick that tyrants have ever come up with in the history of the world to get away with mass evil. And still most Americans, well, you don't like democracy? They can't even process it because they've never thought about it. And they don't nearly see how just that belief tricks them into cheering for evil. Just like all the people cheered for Mao and all the people cheered for Hitler and all the people cheered for Stalin. They had mass approval. Tyranny, here's a fun little quote I'll end with, that quoting myself, thing I posted earlier. Tyranny has not happened in spite of the objections of the general public. Tyranny has happened by demand of the general public when the general public believes in authority and government and democracy. Tyranny has been applauded and praised. That's why there's, that awesome line in one of the Star Wars, so this is how freedom ends, to thunderous applause. Exactly. That is how freedom